Thank you for staying with us this morning. Remember that we were wishing teachers happy Teachers' Day at the beginning of the program? Well, we are still talking teachers, and we'll be focusing our attention on the quality of teachers' training. I mean, yes, they are teachers, but they have to be trained before they go and teach, don't they?
You have to train the trainer.
Train the trainer. Now, they are the prime players in the education of students at every level. Teachers can be described as the live wire of the education system at all levels, and they are the most important element in any educational program. Well, to help us appreciate the work that teachers do, and to tell us or discuss with us this morning the importance of the training that they have to receive before they go into the classrooms to impart knowledge, it's my pleasure to welcome the CEO of Lani Group, Mr. Annie Bassi Ayo. Hi.
Good morning, how are you?
Morning, good to see you again.
Thank you very much.
And we have
Happy Teachers' Day.
Happy Teachers' Day to you. We also have Bola Onime, who is Chairman, Lagos Island Chapter of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management of Nigeria. Thank you for joining us, Bola.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Mr. Ayo, you are a regular on this program. Let me begin with you. I know that by and large, teachers in Nigeria have been disenchanted, and we have had this conversation with you before. Is there any improvement in that area? Are they getting a better deal?
Okay, good morning, Alero. Thank you for having me once again on Sunrise. It's always nice to have me on your program. I'm going to be speaking in perspective of Axiom Learn. It's a private sector company, and it's a company that trains teachers. So I'm not talking from a view of government. I'm going to talk from a view of a stakeholder with emphasis on training teachers in Nigeria. The answer to your question is yes, there have been some improvements, particularly post-COVID. We have realized that we can no longer wait because waiting costs money. And during COVID, we saw that learning costs in terms of economic, in terms of healthcare, and more important, in terms of educational learning gaps. So there has been more concerted efforts, even by this administration of President Buhari. And one thing I must say that has come out well in the last 8 years is that teachers have finally have increased retirement age and increased welfare packages, all being in the course of being implemented. So on that hand, I would say there is some no longer lip service. There's some sort of thing going on around teacher welfare, and welfare is very intrinsic to training. But before I delve further, I just want to put things in perspective. When we talk about teacher training, there are two aspects to teacher training. There's the aspect of pre-service, that is the quality of training they get, whether before they become teachers in the classroom, that's before they become accredited teachers. That they go through the National Colleges of Education, and they do a qualifying them with the Teachers Registration Council, etc. And then on the other hand, which is really where we have a larger problem, is the continuous training of teachers in service. And you probably might be surprised to note that teachers are actually the largest profession in Nigeria, in fact, on the continent of Africa. We have at the moment about 3 million registered professional teachers. Do we have enough continuing professional development programs for them? The answer is no. And why is that so? We know that teacher training has largely been delivered through public sector budgets. The budgets have been broken for 2 years now, and we just don't have the numbers. 10, 15 years ago, when we had the MDG's office running, and we had the then Special Assistant Haji Amina, who's now the UN's Deputy Secretary General, we had larger programs training, mass training of teachers. We don't have the funds to push that. So there now has been a paradigm shift. And it's one of the things we really are trying to advocate for, that the teachers themselves must be able to own their training, must be able to own their continuous professional development by being able to pay for training. But I want to say something. We really have COVID and the digital disruption provide for us a very interesting opportunity. The interesting opportunity that lots of this training now can be virtual. So,
well, Mr. Basieyo, I find it very interesting when you say that the teachers should own their training, and I couldn't agree more. But then when you look at their take home, it raises a lot of question about their capacity or ability to do that. But I'll come to you. Let's take the opening comments of Mrs. Onime as well on this conversation. Well, you are part of a personnel management system, so you understand the challenges that the teachers themselves have to go through. Well, any employee, specifically speaking to teachers now. Speak to us about the management of this class of personnel from what you have seen, whether at the state level or at the federal level, you know, Nigeria generally or Lagos State where you operate basically. What is your understanding or your take on the general perception of teachers by the people who supervise them?
Thank you very much.
Could you kindly unmute because we can barely hear you? Okay, well, we'll come back to you, madam. So let me come back to you, Mr. Ayo. So speak to that issue that I raised about the teachers owning their training. It is, you know, virtual, you say, so these things can be at their own comfort and convenience and all of that. But if they are to own it, I don't know if it's okay to ask you to explain what you mean by them owning it. Does that mean them paying for it or them taking the lead in ensuring how it goes? What exactly do you mean by owning it in the context of their take-home generally?
Yeah. Most important thing, when we look at issues like this, issues of transformation, issues of change behavior, let's try to walk away from money. I know money is important. I did raise the issue of broken budgets in the public sector. The key thing is always visioning and leadership. And what we're saying and advocating for is that we must allow and strengthen the capacity of the teachers to own their continuous professional development, because they understand the classrooms they are in. They understand the peculiar situations and circumstances that surround them. So let me explain further. You can't just sit as a Commissioner of Education and say, oh, we have 5,000 teachers in my state. I want to train them on mass communication skills and leadership. When maybe this is, you're talking about Kaduna State and in Kagoro local government, there's a prevalent issue around special needs. And it would have been better that if it was more of a bottom-up approach, we would have certain teachers building up the capacities in special needs educations and disabilities. So we need to strengthen, and we can't just leave them on their own. And this is where we need to support the financing of those programs. We need to support them understanding their own needs evaluation, particularly through head teachers. When we talk about teachers, there's also something which is ongoing now by the Teachers Registration Council. We've seen that we can't just say that teachers are a homogeneous group of professionals. In Finland, we have expert teachers. We have, you know, same thing like in South Korea. So what's happening now with the Teachers Registration Council and our company Axiom and some other stakeholders such as UNICEF is strengthening that reclassification of teachers, so we can have head teachers, expert teachers. And what this will do, it will force these various genres or cadres of teachers to be led by a head teacher at a local level that understands their needs at the classroom and therefore strongly drives the continuing professional development. There are more players that need to come to the ecosystem. Banks need to be able to give loans for career development. The federal government should be able to facilitate career development. And just as we've had CBN provide real sector funding, I think it's time to have real sector funding in the education sector, so that teachers can maybe access maybe a year, 200,000 worth of career development loan, and they can choose a provider, whether it's in-face or virtual. And that is one way by us being able to place it back in their hands. And before I just close on that comment, we found that a lot of our teacher training is also being led by foreign donors. And it's not right. The foreign donors, as the USAID, the DFIDs and co, often come with their own perspective and their own development agenda. So it is us, and it needs to be done from grassroots. The teachers must own it. The players, the Parent Teachers Association, the students themselves, it should all come in to the needs evaluation so the teachers themselves are able to ascertain what they need and therefore go to the right provider. So I hope I've clarified that issue about ownership, which is very pivotal to the change in how teacher training should run in Nigeria as a country. Thank you.
Well, having gone on for so long, I mean, you know all the things that you needed to do over the years. Most certainly, you know, the persuasion is there. Let's check back on Mrs. Onime. If you can hear me now?
I can hear you. You confirm if you can hear me.
Oh, most certainly. Jolly. So,
okay.
To the question that I asked you earlier, your assessment of the general training system or apparatus for teachers, be it nationally or Lagos to be specific, if that's what you would prefer to do, because I mean, many people go to schools, the public schools in particular, and they're asking questions. While the qualifications and all of that is there, the general attitude to the students and the students that come out of schools leave so much more to be desired.
Okay, so thank you once again for having me. And as has been said by my co-moderator or my co-discussant, it's as he said, I wonder why it is that we do not pay as much attention as is needed to training. You know, in the private sector, it's now learning and development, because we understand if you learn, then you develop. And if you do not develop, then what lecture, what knowledge do you have to pass across to people? When you look at it, the budget that goes to education, the budget that goes to learning, the budget that goes to training is usually the rock bottom, where you feel, okay, let's just do it. Even as much as ITF is trying to encourage organizations that once you train your staff, you get some particular percentage back, so that way everything you're paying to them as a body is not lost totally. But for Lagos State, yes, I think there's been some measure of improvements, because when you look at, I think the last result that came out, we saw a 60% pass, which prior to that, I think we had a 38%, though my figures can be reconfirmed. I'm not absolutely sure. I'm on national TV, I have to be careful here. But I think there seemed to be an improvement from what we had. And as I said, probably because of COVID, people had opportunity to train themselves. And it grieves me where if you need to get the kind of training you need, you have to do it out of pocket. How many people can actually do that? How many people can afford to train yourself? And whatever training our teachers have is what comes out with from the product that we have. I work in the private sector. We get to interview students. We get to employ them. And I know some time ago, Lagos State had a program where students in SS2 and SS3 had to come, you train them, prepare them for the workplace and all that. And even as on CIPM, we do advocacy visits to schools. This way we get to gauge what has been done. You know, we may not have absolute authority on what is being done in schools, but then we try as much as possible to come in to help, because if there is intervention from the private sector, it would help. Teachers, if the government doesn't do it, if you look at the economy, how much money can they take out of themselves?
Well, madam, yeah, my apologies for butting it, but you know, one of the questions that come to mind naturally is, do you think we even give enough recognition to the teaching profession, knowing that every profession has to go through a teacher? From the nursery school, primary school, children begin to learn how to draw little boxes. These little boxes are what eventually form the architects. You write numbers, you write letters. These are the things that writers and several other professions are made of. So in the general context, do you think that governments or the authorities across board give enough recognition, enough reverence to the teaching profession?
Absolutely not. I'm sorry, it's so sad, but no. In my opinion, from experience, from what I've seen and what I've known, no, they don't get enough. Now we look at the medical profession, but then how do doctors come to be, if not through the teachers? Now we are talking about IT saved us during COVID, but if there had not been enough teaching of the IT profession, how would they have come to be? If anything, for me, I think if you look at it from the hierarchy, teachers should actually be at the top. If they should come to the top, they should be at the top. But what recognition they get is not what is required. It is not enough.
Mr. Ayo, with COVID, teaching took a different dimension. A lot of children now had to be taught at home. So teachers had to have acquired other skills apart from just teaching, because they now had to teach using the digital platform. How much of that training, which they require now, is undertaken by them, and how much is acquired by the employees, the state governments, or whoever?
Okay, so I heard my Mrs. Onime speak, and I just wanted to say something. I think one of the things I would take back to our partners in the public sector is that they don't showcase a lot of what they're doing. I know they are doing a lot of work at federal, at state government. I don't know about local government, because my company, we don't really interface at the local government level. We work with subnational, national. So in terms of recognition, before I answer the question about digital, there has been a lot of efforts on recognizing and professionalizing the profession of teachers. We now have the Maltina Challenge, which is an annual prize. And even last year, a Nigerian teacher was a runner-up at the Global Teacher Prize, which is part of the Vaki Foundation. It's run out of Dubai, and it's $1 million prize. So I have seen a lot of improvements on the teaching level. There's so many NGOs and strategic companies like ourselves that provide and help solve the problem along with players and actors on the public sector side. So there has been definitely more recognition for teachers than before. However, there's still a lot of work to be done.
Yes, my apologies. Perhaps it's because you are in the sector. I'm sure you will come back to my partner's question earlier, earlier thrown at you. Perhaps it's because you pay attention to the sector because you know what is going on in there. But perhaps some of these, things that you have talking about that have been done are few and far between. So what then would be the ratio, in your opinion, of this intervention and impact of the intervention across board in the profession?
Okay, so I'm still going to come back to Alera's question about digital, because that's important. But I think it's very, I think, when I started, I said that it's almost like we're operating in silos, and we don't know what's going on in would I say the public education sector, because that's really the larger part of the education sector in this country. Some of the analysis and statistics coming out has shown our teachers' recognition to even be far above our peers in South Africa. I'm talking about statistics here. So we're nowhere near where we should be, please don't get me wrong, but we are certainly far better than where we were 10, 15 years ago when the MDG started, and realized that our teachers were very poor quality and that the issues of retraining, welfare was not done. Like I just said, now teachers' welfare package have been increased. They can now retire at age 65. I don't know if you're aware of that. It was signed up by the president last year. Their salaries are being increased. So there are things happening, clearly. It's not the same. It's a moving ship. And those indices show that at both state and federal, there's a movement. And some states are doing more than federal. So at the federal, you can see institutions like the Teachers Registration Council, led by Professor Josiah. They're doing fantastic work with UNICEF. They're professionalizing the sector. You have the National Teachers Institute, Kaduna, who are doing a lot of work. These are two institutions I can say, and obviously UBEC, UBEC, who are doing quite work. Yes, there's still more work to be done. So because of time, I'm going to now jump to Alera's question. And if you feel there's still some things you want me to answer, I'm happy to do that after. But Alera, you were absolutely spot on. COVID created a confusion. The confusion was not just in the education sector, it was global, it was far-reaching, it was a conundrum. In Nigeria, we had a webinar, Pan-African webinar led by our education business, Axiom Learning, in March. And we had about 1,300 participants join that. At that time, none of us all around the continent even had an emergency plan for education because it had just hit us in the face. But I would say that a year on, 2 years on, that there are certain good things that have come out. There's been a lot of innovation around software for teaching, and there's more on the learner side. I think there's been a lot more improvement on the learner side and learner support. So you have software, you have things that help facilitate learner learning and experiences. However, on the teaching and instructor side, we've not seen a lot of that come out through the door yet. Again, it's led by the economics here because teachers are expected, they're not the ones that pay for it, unlike learners where the parents would pay for those things. However, I sat on a committee at the Teachers Registration Council with UNICEF, and there was a program put in place to train 30,400 teachers across 16, 17 states on the use of digital learning in times of disruption. So what are times of disruption? It's not just COVID. In the southeast of Nigeria, we've had a disruption because of the Monday strikes by IPOB. So think about it, out of 5 days a week, we've lost 20% of learning time over a year. And you're not having a war situation, you are not having a COVID situation. Those are times of disruption. So what we're doing now with TRCN, with NTI, with partners like UNICEF, Save the Children, is developing programs that build the capacity of teachers, particularly teachers in the rural areas, to use digital devices safely and correctly. Okay. We've trained on cyber crime, cyber security. Even during COVID, we used radio as an instruction. We implemented the nomadic curriculum for education in 2014, and that curriculum is fantastic because we use what we call interactive radio instruction, and that was also used during COVID. So there are so many ways that we Nigerian government, along with the private sectors, along with development partners, have upscaled, I would say, over 100,000 teachers, which is still small, but it has happened.
Okay. Well, Mrs. Onime, speak to the welfare of teachers from the teachers' perspective, from the supervisors of the teachers, and from their paymasters. What should we be doing? I know that Mr. Baseyo, would have his angles to this as well, but you're into personnel management in terms of how that workforce is managed. Speak to the elements that need to be developed in order for us to have a sustainably successful teaching profession in the country.
Okay, so thank you very much. When it comes to welfare, it is applicable to everyone, whether teacher or no teacher, but for them, looking at how strategic their role is to the country at large, because you can imagine where you have an uneducated environment, an uneducated country, is a whole lot of trouble. But in my own case, I feel first thing is they should be comfortable enough. When you have an attractive pay that you can get people, you can imagine someone with a master's degree, someone with a PhD, and you're willing to go to a primary school to teach, and it's a government primary school. There must be an attraction for you to. Maybe you have the pay is good, it's commensurate to the class of work, because teachers' work for me is a class A. So once the pay is commensurate to one, you will be able to attract the best brains. I don't see any reason why I want to go. Even if I'm an IT professional, I would love to go into the teaching profession so I can share my knowledge. And you can only do that when they know that, okay, once I'm going there, then I won't be poor. Most times they will tell you teachers are the poorest, but that shouldn't be. So we'll start from the pay. And when they get into the pay, then how do you sustain it? You sustain the pay and you make sure that continually their knowledge is replenished. whatever are the changes globally, and I would say globally because now we're in a global village, and everything we do should actually be, globally localized. Though you are in a local environment, but you should also have global knowledge where they or the children that they are being taught can compete in the global environment. And you can only do that when you have teachers. So you can imagine students in private school and students in public school, and they are going into the same world. We're doing a great level of disservice if our teachers are not globally enlightened. So training should be really, really important, should be continual, and should be immediate. Once there are any changes, then there should already be programs where teachers are already selected to go on and learn, as it is done in private sector. Once there's a change in product, change in services, change in policies, before you know it, employees in that line have been nominated to go get training and get on top of it so the business can continue. This same thing should be applied to our teachers. And we'll talk about retirement. Now, we need to look at it. It's neither here nor there for me that you're retiring at 60 or you're retiring at 65. How much strength do they still have? Are we supposed to make their retirement comfortable, or we make them to work for longer? I don't know. That is an intellectual discussion that needs to be had. But if as retirement, you have a price to pay, then I can encourage my child to also go into the teaching profession. When you ask now, how many people want to be a teacher, you can imagine the kind of response you would get from students. So you start from making them comfortable while in the profession, while they are there, make sure continuous learning is available. Training trainer, any new changes, policy and curriculum reviews, continually, so they can compete globally. It's a global world now. Okay. Thanks to COVID, it happened faster than we thought. Okay. So now everything is global. And after that, make their retirement comfortable, make it beautiful. Is it housing plan?
I'm sorry, Mrs. Onimele. We ran out of time about 2 minutes ago.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mrs. Bolanle Onime, Chairman, yes, Lagos Island Chapter, Chartered Institute of Personnel Management of Nigeria. And we also had Mr. Annie Basi-Ayo, CEO, Lani Group / Axiom Learning Solution, who have come to talk to us today about the quality of teachers and the kind of training that they get. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Just before we go, happy Teachers' Day again.
Remember your teacher. Just remember your teacher and say thank you.
Exactly. Thank you for staying with us. Sunrise will be right back with another interesting conversation in just a moment. Stay with us.